So whenever you speak from here, you're going to speak from here. You normally do, okay? When the rest, when we normally are to the side or whatever, all that's going to be up here, so you'll sit up on the stage and then everything else will be speaking from the stage. So far enough back, and then come right even with here, and then you'll speak. Yes, if you're talking, you come forward, you come far enough back. Yeah, and everybody else get back. So here, and then everybody else will be behind. So you're going to have to get flush with me.
Why don't we just step down?
No, I don't want you stepping down. Just stay on, because they can't film it. If you film it, it'll go up and down.
You want to put this stool?
So line up how you normally do it. Line up how you normally do it.
Oh, wow. It just looks like you're saying. Watch out. Okay, I'll look amazing up here.
So don't say you would speak. You just step here. You don't step off. When somebody speaks, so if you go.
So I just start here.
You'll start here. You'll start here like you normally do. But then you'll go back up. But then you don't have to come off. Make sense? Okay. Well, then you come here, but everybody's got to be back. Yes. All right.
Okay, so I'm missing. So where's Emma? Okay, come on.
Yeah, you have two separate sides.
They're out there.
I can hold mine, Mr. Bryant. I can hold mine. You can use this. We're waiting on the technology. When you're ready, we're ready, he said. He gave us the okay.
Okay. I don't know. Wait for a second. At 11 a.m. on March 27, 1961, 9 students from the historically black college, Tougaloo College, walked into an all-white Jackson, Mississippi public library. Joseph Jackson, Jr., their leader, approached the circulation desk. With heart thumping, he stammered a message he had memorized. "Ma'am, I want to know if you have this philosophy book. I need it for a research project." "You know you don't belong here," the library assistant yelled, proceeding to call the library director. "May I help you?" the library director asked as she came out of her office. "We're doing research," the students responded. "Well, there's a colored library on Mill Street," she said. "You are welcome there." Almost immediately, Jackson later reported, police entered the building and told the students to get out of the library. No one moved. The chief of police then told them that they were under arrest. The group later became known as the Tougaloo Nine.
On March 7, 1964, 4 black teenagers, including Alton Cryer, Sterling Call, and David Howard, the fourth's name was never entered into the record, approached the St. Helena branch of the Audubon Regional Library in Greensburg, Louisiana. The library saw them coming, recognized what was happening, immediately locked the door, and posted close signs in the window. The 4 left. 4 days later, the youth returned and met the same response. Through the window, they saw the librarian making a phone call as they approached. Moments later, she unlocked the door, came out, relocked it, and left. This group was referenced as the St. Helena's Four. These are but 2 of the many ultimate successful protests that resulted in the integration of public libraries. Today we stand before you, recognizing those struggles that many fought for to ensure the intellectual freedom, service, and knowledge was available to all.
We'd like to welcome you to the 2018 edition of the annual African American Read-In. This is the first of 2 read-in events facilitated by the Youth Development Team of Lincoln Public Schools and Lincoln City Libraries. My name is William Bryan, and I'm one of the public schools student advocates for the African American community. And I'm joined by Ms. Dominique Kelly Johnson, who is the Re-Engagement Navigator Advocate for Lincoln Public Schools. Today we will serve as your master and mistress of ceremonies.
Today's read-in represents ongoing collaborations between LPS and LCL, The National Council for Teachers of English hosts the National African American Read-In. This national literacy initiative kicks off during Black History Month. The purpose of the read-in is to share the unique experiences found in African American literature with students from pre-K through adulthood. Today you will have the privilege to hear readings and view performances by community stakeholders, which will explore rich African American history, as well as the role and contributions of African Americans in the world of literature and arts. Would you please rise and join me in welcoming Marla Stiles to sing the Negro National Anthem.
The words will be on the screen, but we're going to sing the first verse of the poem entitled Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's a poem that was written by James Weldon Johnson, and it was set to music by his brother, John Weldon Johnson, and it's also known as the Negro National Anthem. Lift every voice and sing,
till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you.
Thank you, and please be seated. Next, we will have Chris Hefner, Director of Media Services, followed by our readers, which read slightly different than your programs due to a few illnesses. The readers will provide their own introduction of self and share their respective reading selection. Welcome, and please join Chris.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's such an honor to be here today. This is my first time attending the African American Read Aloud, and it is such a pleasure to be here celebrating a day dedicated to two of my very favorite things, the joy of reading and the celebration of our nation's rich cultural history through the power of stories. We celebrate this day based on the simple idea that stories connect us. They connect us to our history, to our past, and they connect us to the web of ideas and inspirations that speak to us from their pages. They teach us empathy and understanding. There are millions of stories, and each book we read and story we digest changes us just a little bit. They teach and remind, stretch our imaginations, and expand our worlds. Reading does that for us, and it doesn't cost a dime. Here in Lincoln Public Schools, we believe so strongly in the power of stories that we've made it our mission to hunt down the very best multicultural literature every year and put them in a special traveling display so that teachers, librarians, students, and community members can see them, read them, and grow from them. Every year, our librarians read hundreds of books featuring the history, the culture, and characters that reflect the diversity of our LPS students. And the great news about that is that every year we discover beautiful and powerful stories that help connect all of us to our history, our community, and ourselves. We call that collection the Mosaic, and we've brought down just a few of the hundreds and hundreds of titles that we've discovered to share with you today. Feel free to pick them up, to read them, and by all means, check them out and take them with you. Today, I want to share a short piece from a story called The Book Itch: Freedom, Truth, and Harlem's Greatest Bookstore. This story is about a man named Louis Michaud, who in the 1930s opened a bookstore in Harlem. It wasn't very much at first. It was only 5 books. But through his hard work and belief in his purpose, he grew it to be the largest African-American bookstore in the nation. It was famous, and writers and thinkers, artists and activists from all over came to visit this bookstore in Harlem. It is told from the story of Louis Michaud's son, Louis Michaud Jr. And let me just find my little spot. Me and my dad talk about important things. Things like truth and what it means to be free. Dad says books can help you. Not every book is true, he says, but the more you read, the easier it is to figure out for yourself what is true. Dad lets people read books without buying them. There's a boy who reads in the store every Saturday like it's a library. Dad says, books will help him clear the weeds and plant the seeds so he'll succeed. Like I said, my dad's a poet. I don't always understand his poetry, but I like the sound of Dad's words. He calls the bookstore the house of common sense and the home of proper propaganda. Mom says that means the bookstore is a place to find good information and ideas. People come for more than books. They come to talk and to listen. And one of those activists who came to talk and listen was Malcolm X. And he and Louis Michaud became very, very close friends. And Michaud often attended the lectures and speeches that Malcolm X presented. In fact, he was supposed to be there in the ballroom that night, in the chair next to the podium on the evening that Malcolm X was shot and killed. In the morning, Dad comes to my room. He looks tired, but okay. He sits on the edge of my bed and pets my forehead. Malcolm used to say, if you're not willing to die for it, put the word freedom out of your vocabulary, Dad said. They think they got rid of him, but people won't forget Louis. His words will never leave us. Words. That's why people need our bookstore. Maybe someday I'll believe in something so much I'll have the itch to make it happen. For now, I read books. I ask questions. I listen to the people on the platform outside. And I talk with my dad about the truth. I hope as we read and as we listen today and every day that we ask ourselves those important questions and learn to talk about the truth with each other. Happy reading and welcome.
About a half hour ago, I would ask if I would fill in for a sick person. Never want to pass up an opportunity to address young people, so I couldn't say no. I have a goal to try to read at least 1 to 4 books per month. So trying to come up with one book, one expression within that short a period of time was a very daunting task. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. One of the things that during this time of the month, one of the things that we would often hear quoted numerous times, just like all over the country, was Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Those words consistently ring through my head. I can consistently hear those words being recited. Growing up in the church in the South, you would often hear preachers proclaim those same words. I have a dream today. Today, as I think about that, one of the things that's important for all of us to remember as we think about those words and that speech is that even though the dreamer may not be here with us, that dream is and it must carry on. That dream that we will live in a nation, that we will be judged by the content of our character and not our color. The dream that our young people will only be limited by their ability, they will only be limited by their vision of what they're able to achieve. I'm often reminded also of a quote, and this is for our young people as well, reminded of a quote by William Jennings Bryan. That quote by William Jennings Bryan simply states that destiny is not a matter of chance. but a matter of choice. It is not something to be waited for, but it is something to be achieved. And I believe that as a nation, that we're not destined to be a place of racism and inequality, but it will depend on the choices that we make that will determine the type of nation that we will be. So to our young people, know that you're only limited by your vision of what you want to become in the future. You will only be limited by your choices will determine your destiny, nothing else. And when you consider your journey, what's important to remember is that it is not where your journey begins, but where you want your journey to end and what you do to get there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Harris, and today I would like to share with you a brief overview of the life of Miss Phyllis Wheatley and the impact that she has had on my life personally. Phyllis Wheatley was the first published African-American female poet, born in West Africa. She was sold into slavery at the age of 7 or 8. She was purchased by the Wheatley family of Boston, who taught her to read and write. She learned to speak and write English very quickly, and within 16 months she could read a difficult passage from the Bible. She then began to study Latin and English literature and write poetry. This remarkable talent was unheard of. She went on to continue to write, including a book of poems. However, it was not an easy road. People didn't believe that she, a slave, was intellectually capable of writing such poetry, so much so that Miss Wheatley had to defend herself in the court of law and be examined prior to having her work published. Following the examination by 18 prestigious Boston residents, it was determined that she did in fact write the poems. When Miss Wheatley went to publish her book, she had to have an attestation in her book that she was the original author. Before people would be able to open the book and read and access her words, they would have to see the following. I quote, "We whose names are underwritten do assure the world that the poems specified in the following page were, as we verily believe, written by Phyllis, a young Negro girl, who was but a few years since brought an uncultivated barbarian from Africa, has ever since been, and now is, under the disadvantage of serving as a slave in the family in this town. She has been examined by some of the best judges and is thought qualified to write them." Think about that for a moment. These words were attached to one of the most foundational works of the African American literature movement. The 1773 publication of Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Morale, brought her fame, both in England and the American colonies. Figures such as George Washington praised her work. She was set free soon after the publication of her book, and her work was foundational and would live on forever. The reason why I selected Miss Wheatley is because she is a trailblazer. She was a trailblazer. She forged a path so that others could follow. She overcame the obstacles that were placed in front of her because of the color of her skin and her circumstances. When I was a young girl, my family was separated and I was placed into the foster care system. My circumstances as a foster child, who came from poverty, who was of color, also put me at a disadvantage to my peers. I bounced around to several different schools and many times switched schools during the middle of the school year. This made it hard for me to make friends and keep up as my environment was constantly changing. To stay ahead, I had to work twice as hard and do it without any support at home and while dealing with the stress of my situation. When I first learned of Miss Wheatley, I was about 8 years old. And I remember when I learned about her story, I thought to myself, I am not alone. I was blown away. It was the first time that I had ever really connected with the pain of another in a way that shook me to my core and created a foundation for resiliency. I remember when I learned about her as a child, I felt as if the words of her story created an armor that covered my broken soul, and this armor is what I would take into the battlefield of life with me. Miss Wheatley gave me hope. She empowered me. I was determined to be like her, to be a trailblazer, to want better for my future children, for future generations, and to be a part of making a difference. Miss Wheatley showed me that I could forge my own trail and that I did not have to be what my circumstances said I was. She was my role model as a child. And when I felt discouraged and like giving up, I remembered that she had forged a path just like many others for me. African American literature gave me a solid ground as a child when I felt my world was unstable. I'm thankful for the impact that Miss Wheatley has had on my life, and I'm thankful for the continued celebration of these great works. Thank you.
Hi, I am relatively new to Lincoln. I'm a meteorologist for Channel 8, and I will be reading a few poems, a little bit different than the people before me, and the general themes of these poems is kind of overcoming adversity and overcoming hardships that people might have faced growing up, as well as remembering your own identity, because, you know, for some people in the African American community, the struggles and the discrimination they face often lead some people to kind of be ashamed of who they are. And with these writings, I feel that they show you you can overcome any hard struggles that you put up with, and that getting to where you are isn't necessarily always going to be an easy task, but if you keep yourself at it, you can reach your goals and you can be living a dream. And in regards to the identity, one of the poems discusses that, and how a lot of people aren't aware of their own history, where they come from, be it in their family or maybe more of a culture, and that it's very important to remember your roots and where you originated. This first one is Life is Fine by Langston Hughes. I went down to the river. I sat down on the bank. I tried to think but couldn't, so I jumped in and sank. I came up once and hollered, I came up twice and cried. If that water hadn't have been so cold, I might have sunk and died. But it was cold in that water, it was cold. I took the elevator 16 floors above the ground. I thought about my baby and thought I would jump down. I stood there and I hollered, I stood there and I cried. If it hadn't have been so high, I might have jumped and died. But it was high up there, it was high. So since I'm still here living, I guess I will live on. I could have died for love, but for living I was born. Though you may hear me holler and you may see me cry, I'll be dog, sweet baby, if you gonna see me die. Life is fine, fine as wine, life is fine. The second one is Mud of the Sun by Langston Hughes. Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a-climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps 'cause you find it's kinder hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. This final one, a little bit longer. It's called Colonial Girls School by Olive Sr. Borrowed images willed our skins pale, muffled our laughter, lowered our voice, let out our hymns, dekinked our hair, denied our sex in gem tunics and bloomers, harnessed our voices to madrigals and genteel airs, yoked our minds to declensions in Latin and the language of Shakespeare, told us nothing about ourselves. There was nothing about us at all. How those pale northern eyes and aristocratic whispers once erased us, how our loudness, our laughter debased us. There was nothing left of ourselves, nothing about us at all. Studying history ancient and modern, kings and queens of England, steppes of Russia, wheat fields of Canada. There was nothing of our landscape there, nothing about us at all. Marcus Garvey turned twice in his grave. 38 was a beacon, a flame. They were talking of desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas, Lumumba in the Congo. To us, mumbo jumble. We had read Vachel Lindsay's vision of the jungle. Feeling nothing about ourselves, there was nothing about us at all. Months, years, a childhood, memorizing Latin declensions. For our language, bad talking, detentions. Finding nothing about us there. Nothing about us at all. So, friend of my childhood years, one day we'll talk about how the mirror broke, who kissed us awake, who let a Nazi from the bag. For isn't it strange how northern eyes and the brighter world before us now pale? Thank you.
My name is Stuart Venable. I'm the head strength and conditioning coach at Lincoln High School. Forgive my attire. I had 2 weight training classes this morning, and when I leave, I have 2 more. And the glasses, my body is betraying me. This is a book that my pops gave me in my ignorance when I thought I was doing okay and I didn't need school. It was a waste of my time. The Miseducation of the Negro by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. The original that my pops gave me, I gave to my son when I thought he was ready. And after I did it, I missed my book, so I went and purchased me another one, the revised edition. Only by careful study of the Negro himself and the life which he is forced to lead can we arrive at the proper procedure in this crisis. The mere imparting of information is not education. Above all things, the effort must result in making a man think and do for himself, just as the Jews have done in spite of universal persecution. In thus estimating the results obtained from the so-called education of the Negro, the author does not go to the census figures to show the progress of the race. It may be of no importance to the race to be able to boast today of many times as many educated members as it had in 1865. If they are of working kind, the increase in numbers will be a disadvantage rather than an advantage. The only question which concerns us here is whether these educated persons are actually equipped to face the ordeal before them or unconsciously contribute to their own undoing by perpetrating the regime of the oppressor. Herein, however, lies no argument for the oft-heard contention that education for the white man should mean one thing and for the Negro a different thing. The element of race does not enter here. It is merely a matter of exercising common sense in approaching people through their environment in order to deal with conditions as they are, rather than as you would like to see them or imagine they are. There may be a difference in method of attack, but the principle remains the same. Highly educated Negroes denounce persons who advocate for the Negro, a sort of education different in some respects from that now given to the white man. Negroes who have been so long inconvenienced and denied opportunities for development are naturally afraid of anything that sounds like discrimination. They are anxious to have everything the white man has, even if it is harmful. The possibility of originality in the Negro, therefore, is discounted 100% to maintain a nominal equality. If the whites decide to take up Mormonism, the Negro must follow their lead. If the whites neglect such a study, then the Negroes must do so likewise. The author, however, does not have such an attitude. He considers the educational system as it has developed both in Europe and America an antiquated process which does not hit the mark even in the case of the needs of the white man himself. If the white man wants to hold on to it, let him do so. But the Negro, so far as he is able, should develop and carry out a program of his own. The so-called modern education, with all its defects, however, does others so much more than it does the Negro, because it has been worked out in conformity to the ends who have enslaved and oppressed weaker peoples. For example, philosophy and ethics resulting from our educational system have justified slavery, peonage, segregation, and lynching. The oppressor has the right to exploit, to handicap, and to kill the oppressed. Negroes daily educated in the tenets of such a religion of the strong have accepted the status of the weak as divinely ordained, and during the last 3 generations of their nominal freedom, they have practically nothing to change it. Their pouting and resolution, indulged by a few of the race, have often been of little avail. No systematic effort toward change has been possible, for, taught the same economics, history, philosophy, literature, and religion which have established the present code of morals, the Negro's mind has been brought under the control of his oppressor. The problem of holding the Negro down, therefore, is easily solved. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place. He will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary. The same educational process which inspires and stimulates the oppressor with the thought that he is everything and has accomplished everything worthwhile, depresses and crushes at the same time the spark of genius in the Negro by making him feel that his race does not amount to much and never will measure up to the standards of other people. The Negro, thus educated, and the hopeless liability of the race. The difficulty is that the educated Negro is compelled to live and move among his own people with whom he is taught to despise. As a rule, therefore, the educated Negro prefers to buy his food from the white grocer because he has been taught the Negro is not clean. It does not matter how often a Negro washes his hands, then he cannot clean them. And it does not matter how often a white man uses his hands, he cannot soil them. The educated Negro, moreover, is disinclined to take part in the Negro business because he has been taught in economics that Negroes cannot operate in this particular sphere. The educated Negro gets less and less pleasure out of the Negro church, not on account of its primitiveness and increasing corruption, but because of his preference for the seats of righteousness controlled by his oppressor. This has been his education, and nothing else can be expected of him. If the educated Negro could go off and be white, he might be happy, but only a mulatto now and then can do this. The large majority of this class then must go through life denouncing white people because they are trying to run away from the blacks and decrying the blacks because they are not white. Thank you.
What do you do with an idea written by Kobe Amada is a story for anyone, at any age, who has ever had an idea that seemed a little too big, too odd, too difficult.
Throughout history and the civil rights movement, it was often an idea that was different.
Like one by 8-year-old Claire Looper, who made a motion that they would go down to Cat's drugstore in Oklahoma and just sit and sit until they served me, Jordan Collins.
Until they served me, Tatum Moore. Until they served me, Brian Morquecho.
Until they served me, Ashad Kareem.
Until they served me, Aliya Robey.
Until they served me, Dulce Vega.
Until they served me, Emily Pina.
Until they served me, Asa Stewart.
Until they served me, Kylan Trout.
Until they serve me, Haslam Cody.
Until they serve me, Sophia Luzum.
This led to the desegregation of the drugstore's lunch counter in Oklahoma City.
Or ideas that seemed a little wild. Ones that people doubted. Ones that people sacrificed for so something amazing may happen.
Like Amara Ross, who you may know as Harriet Tubman, who didn't let her dream be deferred when her first attempt to escape from slavery didn't work. But she didn't quit. Her idea got bigger, helping 300 slaves to freedom.
One day, I had an idea. Where did it come from? Why is it here, I wonder? What do you do with an idea? Well, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told scholars at Barrett Junior High School on October 26, 1967.
Be ready for it. At first, when you dream of an idea, you won't think much of it. African-American poet, novelist, and playwright Langston Hughes talked about this in his poem, What Do You Do with a Dream Deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over it like a syrup sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?
But the idea followed me, like the 600 civil rights marchers who on March 7, 1965, joined John Lewis and headed out of Selma, Alabama, as they attempted to peacefully cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They were halted that day by state and local lawmen, who attacked them with billy clubs and tear gas.
I worried what others would think. What would people say about my idea? What if I had kept it to myself, hid it away, and didn't talk about it? Tried to act like everything was the same as if it was before my ideas showed up. Like when a kindergarten African-American girl on the morning of November 14, 1960, linked by federal marshals, was not a hidden figure, showing up at all whites William Stratz Elementary School in Louisiana to get an equal education.
There was something magical about my idea. I had to admit, I and people like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. felt better and happier when it was around.
And when this happens, when we all allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every state, in every city, every village, in every hamlet, we'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the all-Negro spiritual, free at last, that God Almighty were free at last.
It grew bigger, and we became friends. I showed it to other people, even though I was afraid of what they would say. I was afraid that people saw
us using the same drinking fountains,
us
using the same restrooms,
us
eating at the same lunch counters.
Many will laugh at it. I was afraid that they'll think it was silly.
If we
sat by you on the bus,
if we voted, if we
demanded equal pay,
if we marched together.
And many of them did. They said it was no good. They said it was too weird. Like George C. Wallace, the 1964 governor of Alabama who opposed to civil rights movement. He said,
I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that destroys private property. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that destroys neighborhood schools. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that destroys your right, my right, to choose my neighbors or to sell my house to whoever I choose. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that destroys the labor seniority system. I am having nothing to do with the so-called Civil Rights Bill. I don't think you heard me. I'm having nothing to do with the so-called Civil Rights Bill.
And at first, I and others believed people like him. I actually thought about giving up on my idea. I and others like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Yes, even he almost gave up on his idea.
but then I realized What do they really know? This is my idea. No one knows it like I do. And it's okay if it's different and weird and maybe a little crazy. I find others who'd protect it and care for it, like the Freedom Riders, a group of white and African American civil rights activists who participated in bus trips to the American South in 1961 to protest segregated bus terminals. Yeah, those are the people I needed, and I decided to protect my ideas, to care for it. I fed it good food, I worked with it, I played with it, but most of all, like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told me, I remained ready for it.
My young friends, doors are opening to you. Doors of opportunities that were not open to your mothers and fathers. And the challenge facing you is to be able to face these doors as they open.
My idea grew, and so did my love for it. If I
studied hard to burn the midnight oil and do not drop out of school, despite all the sociological reasons, and in spite of your economic plight, and in spite of the situation that you are forced to live in, stay in school.
And if there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy, then right here is your answer.
Then, one day, something amazing happened. My idea changed right before my very eyes. It spread its wings, took flight, and burst into the sky. I don't know how to describe it, but it went from being here to being everywhere. Like Juneteenth, June 19, 1865, when Union soldiers landed at Galveston, Texas, with news that the war had ended and that the enslaved were now free. This was 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which had become official January 1st, 1863. It wasn't just a part of me anymore. It was now a part of everything. And then I realized what you do with an idea.
You do what Martin did, march. You do
what Ella Baker did, organize.
You do
what Muhammad did, fight.
You do
what Colonel Paul Adams did, serve.
You do
what Nelson did, end apartheid.
You do
what the Little Rock Nine did, go to school.
You do
what union leader and labor organizer Cesar Chavez did, advocate.
You do
what Birmingham Church, 1964, would have done with their ideas.
You do
what Muhammad did. You do what 14-year-old Emmett Till, an African American from Chicago, would have done.
You do
what Matthew Shepard, a student at the University of Wyoming, would do.
You do
what Dafiola Bullock would. Stand up and speak out.
What have they done with their ideas?
They changed me. They changed Nebraska. They changed the world.
What will we do with our ideas?
We will change the world.
I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. And I told them that upstairs when I met them, that I really kind of hoped I didn't. So thank you. The pressure is on. Good afternoon. My name is Marla Stiles, and I am the Human Resources Specialist and the ADA Coordinator for Lincoln Public Schools, the Human Resources Department. I am proud to stand before you with this opportunity today and read the words that were eloquently spoken by Barbara Charlene Jordan, U.S. Congressional Representative from Texas. She was the first African-American Congresswoman to come from the South. She was also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and stands for the sorority in terms of social justice. I'm very proud to say that I am a member of this sorority, and I also currently serve as the chapter president for the Lincoln Alumni Chapter. I encourage our students and I encourage all of you in reading, because I'm a big reader. My mother, who's here, will tell you that I have books galore, because I've always enjoyed reading, to do research and listen to the words of Barbara Jordan in her speeches and her writings. You can listen to her televised speech that was done before the U.S. Judiciary Committee during the impeachment proceedings for President Richard Nixon in 1974. But I also encourage you to listen to her keynote address at the 1992 Democratic Convention. From me today, I'm going to present to you excerpts from Barbara Jordan's keynote address at the 1976 Democratic National Convention that was delivered on July 12, 1976 in New York, New York. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this very warm reception. It was 140 years ago that members of the Democratic Party first met in the convention to select a presidential candidate. Since that time, Democrats have continued to convene once every 4 years and draft a party platform and nominate a presidential candidate. And our meeting this week is a continuation of that tradition. But there's something different about tonight. There is something special about tonight. What is different? What is special? I, Barbara Jordan, am a keynote address. A lot of years passed since 1832, and during that time, it would have been most unusual for a national political party to ask Barbara Jordan to deliver a keynote address. But tonight, here I am. And I feel that notwithstanding the past, that my presence here is one additional bit of evidence that the American dream need not forever be deferred. Now that I have this grand distinction, what in the world am I supposed to do with it? I could easily spend this time praising the accomplishments of this party and attacking Republicans, but I don't choose to do that. I could list the many problems which Americans have. I could list the problems that cause people to feel cynical, angry, frustrated, problems which include lack of integrity in government, the feeling that individuals no longer count, the reality of material and spiritual poverty, the feeling that the grand American experiment is failing or has failed. I could recite these problems and then I could sit down and offer no solutions. But I don't choose to do either. The citizens of America expect more. They deserve and they want more than a recital of problems. Congresswoman Jordan does speak of her political affiliation to the Democratic Party, but then she goes beyond that. Listen to her words. And now we must look to the future. Let us heed the voice of the people and recognize their common sense. If we do not, we not only blaspheme our political heritage, but we ignore the common ties that bind all Americans. Many fear the future. Many are distrustful of their leaders and believe their voices are never heard. Many seek only to satisfy their private work, their wants, to satisfy their private interest. But this is a great danger America faces, that we will cease to be one nation and become instead a collection of interest groups, city against suburb, region against region, individual against individual, each seeking to satisfy private wants. If that happens, who then will speak for America? Who then will speak for the common good? A nation is formed by the willingness of each of us to share in the responsibility for upholding the common good. A government is invigorated when each one of us is willing to participate in shaping the future of this nation. In this election, we must define the common good and begin again to shape a common future. Let each person do his or her part. If one citizen is unwilling to participate, all of us are going to suffer. For each American idea, though it is shared by all of us, it is realized in each one of us. Now, I began this speech by commenting to you on the uniqueness of a Barbara Jordan making a keynote address. Well, I'm going to close my speech by quoting, a Republican president, and I ask that you, as you listen to these words of Abraham Lincoln, relate them to the concept of a national community in which every last one of us participates. As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pat Leach, the Director of Lincoln City Libraries. And on behalf of Lincoln City Libraries, I thank you for attending today's event. I especially thank the Belmont Scholars for the performance that brought tears to many eyes. We're delighted, as I said, to partner with Lincoln Public Schools on these events, and I thank LPS and all of you from this building for your hospitality to all of us today. This is about story. As Chris said, it's about sharing stories, remembering stories, honoring stories, learning from stories. So we're honoring that. I would like to offer a special thank you to Pete Ferguson and Brenda Ely for their organization today, so a warm round of applause for those two. And I have a feeling that some of you may be thinking, I'd love to have more of this. And just in case you're one of those people, I want you to know that on Wednesday, February 21st at Isley Branch Library at noon, we'll have an additional African American read-in. You are welcome to join us, and you're certainly welcome to invite others to join you in doing so. Also, I want you to know that the libraries are partnering with the Lead Center for Performing Arts. They're bringing the musical The Color Purple to Lincoln in April, and that musical is based on Alice Walker's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Color Purple, originally published in 1982. We are offering a reading program to go along with that, and we will be hosting special events that go along with it. Again, a way of using reading to enhance the story that was brought forward by Alice Walker. Now, many of you have bookmarks with information about that program called Savor the Color of Life. There's a place where you can log in and begin logging your hours reading. There are great reading ideas on that bookmark, so I invite you to join us in that and to invite your friends and family to join in that as well. As you leave today, I have a feeling that we all will carry in our hearts and minds what we heard today, and I invite all of us to leave with just a sense of gratitude for the gifts of the writers, the gifts of the readers, and the gifts of the storytellers. Thank you.
Thank you for attending today's read-in. Again, another round of applause for our readers and performers.
Okay, we would like for you to now look under your seat, and if you have a tag, please come forward at the conclusion of the experience. If it's not under your seat, it's going to be the seat that's closest to you in your area, so you can look for a few. And you will be receiving a copy of What Do You Do with an Idea from the Belmont Scholars.
If you have the tag, if you have the tag.
If you have that tag, correct. And then we also ask that all of the readers would come forward if you're still here so we can get a picture at the conclusion. Again, thank you for attending, and we hope to see you on the 21st.
Readers, can you come forward so we can take a picture?